Welcome back to Philosophy and Ethics in Games, the series where I break down the choices in some of our favorite games and figure out which decision is the right one. I'm Josh Bearheart Hawk, and today we're starting the zombie outbreak all over in the first episode of Season 3 of Telltale Games The Walking Dead. In case you missed any of the previous episodes, I've linked a playlist in the description below. As I continue to break down the series, I'll add new videos to the playlist so you can find them all in one place. Season 3 of Telltale Games The Walking Dead is called A New Frontier, and it was released episodically starting on December 20th, 2016. The season overall received a mostly positive welcome, though it wasn't as highly acclaimed as its predecessors. Episode 1 is called Ties That Bind, and we open with an emotional phone call between someone named Javi and another male voice. The last time we heard anything akin to a phone conversation was back in the very first episode of the series when Lee listened to the answering machine in Clementine's house. In the call, the unnamed man relays the message that Javi's father is dying, and we watch as a young man sprints up a hill over the remainder of the call. This is our main character, Javier Garcia. The other man on the phone is his brother David, who we see sitting on the porch of the family home as Javier finally arrives. David is having a drink, and he relays the news that their father passed away before Javi could get there. As devastating as that news is, it's clear that there's a lot of animosity on David's end of the relationship, as he punches Javi to the ground and starts opening up about how their father didn't even notice his presence at his bedside, with his focus being on Javier not being there. The family is apparently very close-knit, with Javier being somewhat of a black sheep that wasn't around as often as he should have been. Before David can beat his brother up too much, though, a young man named Gabriel appears at the doorway and asks what they are doing. This is David's son, and he helps to calm the situation as David clearly doesn't want his boy to see violence that he was involved in. As they settle down, David apologizes and the two make up. They're more or less typical brothers, fighting and making up over things that only make sense in the moment. I can honestly say that this opening reminds me a bit of my own childhood with my brothers for that aspect. We learn a bit about the characters as David admits that he was jealous of Javier in the past, which probably accounts for the way he acted when his brother arrived late to their father's passing, and he mentions that Javi has lost more than he'll probably ever have. We can assume that Javier was successful in some way that David hasn't been, but not much more is given before David's wife, Kate, shows up in the doorway to usher them inside. Javier gets an earful from his mother for not being there, and he's apologizing and consoling her as David's daughter, Mariana, comes out of the back bedroom with a cup, making her way to the sink and filling it before heading back toward the room. She's stopped by the rest of the family, who seems to think the young girl is simply unable to understand that her grandfather won't be waking up, and she informs them that he is awake. None of them can believe it, and they all make their way down the hall to find the old man, who they thought was dead, up and walking around. At first, it seems like a miracle, but that feeling is short-lived as he begins attacking everyone, biting Hector first before attacking his grieving widow and biting her on the cheek as she tries to calm him down. David and Javier team up, with David fighting off the old man as Javier smacks his head with a bedpost. This finally ends the attack, but things are just getting started as David jumps in the car with their mother and takes off for the hospital, with Javier warning him to avoid the freeway. The rest of the family piles into an old, beat-up van, and as they drive off, we see Hector look down at the bite on his arm, with a look of worry before the scene goes black. The next thing we see is a herd of zombies making their way toward a fire, with Javier and Kate looking on. It's clear that a significant amount of time has passed, and as they climb back into the van, we can see that they've still got the children with them, but Hector is nowhere to be found. Food, cooking tools, and other supplies can be seen stored in various places in the vehicle, with the inference being that they've adapted to this new world quite well. They've been tracking the herd for a while, and both Javier and Kate seem tired as they light up a marijuana cigarette and talk during the drive away from the zombies. We find out more about the pair, including that Kate was the kid's stepmom, having married David despite her own reservations about being a parent. They also talk about the kids a bit, revealing that Gabe has become a moody teenager, with his mood swings making things tense at times. Before long, though, the kids are waking up and Javier is pulling the van into a junkyard for a supply stop. As Javier is looking for vehicles that still have enough fuel in them to siphon, he stops to talk to Kate for a minute, and she brings up a point that has probably crossed most of the survivors' minds at some point.
There's gonna be a last one, you know? A last tank of gas, last piece of food. What if this place is empty? And the next, and the next?
It's something that we didn't really talk about when we explored the idea of communities and whether or not rebuilding was possible. Being nomadic has its benefits. If you're always on the move, it might be harder for other groups to pin you down and steal your supplies. Running into random strangers is still a possibility, but if you're camped in one place for long enough, you raise the risk of scouts finding you and bringing larger groups to attack. It also means that you have more to scavenge, as clearing out one spot is fine since you'll be in another area the next day. But that is also one of the weak points. The further they get into the apocalypse, the less food there is to find no matter where they are. Other people will have raided a lot. Things that haven't been taken will degrade and become useless. Eventually, you find yourself in need of food with no way to get it. Staying in one place gives you the chance to grow what you need and set up a reliable source of water and other necessities. But as it is, they need to scavenge for now, and Javier soon finds himself going into another section of the junkyard with Gabe as they look for whatever they can find that might be of use. As they're exploring, they come across an old trailer that likely served as an office for the company at some point. A group had obviously taken it over and secured it, stocking up food and other supplies, and it appears it's been abandoned for a while. Kate and Mariana appear in the doorway just as Javi and Gabe are going over what all is there, and the kids beg to stay the night in the trailer. Everyone is ready for a break from the van, and with all the food, the place could be worth spending some time in. Deciding to stay the night seems like the best choice, though it is risky as there could be a group that still occupies the place, and if they return to find a group of strangers eating their food, it could be bad. Either way, as Javi goes to retrieve the fuel that he'd been siphoning from an ambulance nearby, he's confronted by a group of men that look pretty angry to see him. You can't really blame them for being hostile in the situation, and the smart move is keeping calm and being as forthright as possible. Being completely honest isn't an option, but you can choose to reason with them to keep the situation under control. Generally speaking, anyone who doesn't shoot on sight is either reasonable or has some really bad plans for the person they've caught, and it's best to assume the former as a means of prolonging your life. The men lead Javi into the trailer, where they expect to find whatever group he's with. But thankfully, Kate and the kids manage to disappear through a trap door in the floor before being seen. The leader of the group can tell someone else was there, and he even seems understanding in a way, before hitting Javier and telling him he thinks that he's lying about the people he's with. All in all, it seems like the group has been messed with before, and they aren't really willing to take any chances. The leader goes to grab some handcuffs, leaving Javier with one guard. That guard is sympathetic until he hears a noise beneath the floorboards and decides to see what's under the trap door. As he raises it up and spots Kate and Gabe, Javier attacks, eventually wresting the man's pistol from him and whipping him with it. Javier apparently has a lot of strength, because his pistol whip kills the guy. Before Javi can do anything else, the dead guy's buddies come in and knock him out. As he comes to, he finds himself in the cab of some kind of truck, being driven by one of the other guys from the group. The guy is upset about what Javier did to his friend, Lonnie, but he makes it clear that they have some kind of system for dealing with those kinds of things. Before he can elaborate, though, a tree falls across the road in front of them, and the guy winds up wrecking the truck into a ditch. He and Javier both manage to get out, but Javier winds up with the man's gun, and he has to choose to shoot him or spare him. In this situation, the right thing to do is spare the man. His group has shown mercy, despite what happened with Javier killing Lonnie, and the man even puts up his hands to surrender. Shooting an unarmed man, especially one that hasn't really wronged you, is not morally okay in any circumstance. But even as the man is running off, Javier's fortune doesn't seem to be going in the right direction, as someone behind him pumps a shotgun and forces him to drop his weapon. The voice of a young woman tells him to keep looking forward. As he turns around, he realizes she can't be any older than her teens, and she raids the vehicle he's been riding in before turning her attention to him, taking whatever valuable loot he might be carrying. He accuses her of robbing him, but in her view, she's actually taking payment for helping free him. As she's preparing to leave, he pleads for her help. He needs to figure out where he is so he can get back to the junkyard and rescue Kate and the kids. She hesitates for a moment, but finally offers to help in exchange for the van that he tells her he was driving. Javier refuses the offer, but it isn't really up for negotiation. She won't just give him directions, and her counter-offer involves shooting him and taking the van anyway. And this is the perfect point to mention that while we as the player know who the girl is, having spent 2 seasons at this point getting to know Clementine and even playing as her, Javier has no idea who this kid that's robbing him is. He just met her, and while he can assume she's got to be capable based on how she stopped the truck and held him up, he also wouldn't be willing to give up the vehicle that had been his family's home for several years. At this point, neither of them trust each other, and neither should. Trust is something that is built over time and experience, and it's something that is earned. As they walk, they run into a zombie that Clem manages to take down with ease. It's the first of what turns out to be the herd that Kate had been tracking, finally making its way to their location. As they try to make their way around the zombies, Clementine reveals that she's been alone for a while, and revels at how Javier could possibly have survived so long as part of a single group. This conversation brings us back to the discussion about going solo versus having a group. As we've seen over the first couple of seasons, groups haven't really worked out very well for Clementine. The first group that she was in fell apart over the course of a few months, and the second one she wound up in collapsed in just a few days. And the biggest problem many groups seem to face involves ego and leadership issues. Rather than working together toward a common goal, they often wind up with 2 or more people butting heads about how things should be done. But Javier and Kate have found a good balance and have managed to make the group dynamic work. A lot of this has to do with the fact that they were a family before the outbreak, with a long history together serving as a good foundation when society collapsed. They would have obviously had their disagreements, but they found ways to work them out and survive. Being a family pre-outbreak isn't really the whole reason they've managed to last as long as they have, though. It's all about the personalities of the people involved and how good those people are at setting aside ego when it comes to making things work. Ego is one of those things that can cause even rational people to act irrationally. When someone is convinced that they are right and sees being wrong as a bad thing, they will walk through fire and cut off their own limbs before admitting that they might be incorrect about something. When people are willing to set that aside, however, and work together on solutions, they thrive. Kate and Javier work as partners, and he's even willing to admit to Clementine openly that Kate did most of the work as they went along. Before they can reach the junkyard, the herd of zombies cuts them off, and they are forced to make their way to a nearby settlement that Clementine knows about. They get to the gate as it's closing, and they have to thin out the herd a bit before being let in. The name of the place is Prescott, and as nice as it might look, Clem says it's not a great place to stick around longer than necessary. They're stuck there until the herd passes, though, so they decide to make the most of their time. Going into what appears to be the town saloon, Clem tells Javi to grab a drink and make some friends while she handles some business. She's traded with the guy there for some bullets that turned out to be duds, getting her nearly killed as they fought off the zombies at the gate, and she plans to confront him. As Javier wanders up to the bar, the bartender, Conrad, recognizes him, and we find out that Javi used to play baseball professionally but wound up being banned for gambling. This sounds a lot like a real-life situation with a player named Pete Rose, who received a ban for the same thing. That's not really pertinent to the story, just a fun fact that I found kinda cool. Before he can get a drink though, Javier hears Clem yelling at the man that she'd gone to talk to, and he rushes over to see what's going on. The man is denying selling her faulty bullets, and she's getting angry with him for what she sees as an intentional swindle. There's no way to really know for sure whether he traded the bullets in bad faith, and he's claiming that she could have even switched the bullets out for faulty ones to take advantage of him. As unlikely as that might seem, it can't be ruled out either from Javier's perspective. Again, he's only just met her, and she could be trustworthy or a complete liar for all he knows. She raises the gun and pulls the trigger, with a misfire showing her point about the bullets, but also showing a level of carelessness that should not be demonstrated. The man, angry that she would even dare to point the gun and try to fire it, gets up and pulls out a knife, lunging at her as Javier jumps in the way and holds him off. The knife nicks Javi in the eyebrow, but he's able to subdue the man and get him back in the chair. Realizing he's been beaten, the man offers to trade back the batteries that Clem gave him for the bullets. But she isn't happy with that plan and pulls the trigger again in frustration. This time, the bullet isn't faulty though, and a gunshot stops everyone in the bar in their tracks. As Conrad comes running over, Clem begs Javier to lie for her and say that the man was pulling a gun. The whole incident was an accident, but a very preventable one, as Clementine went way over the top in her anger and let her emotions get the best of her. Tripp, the guy who'd let them in the gate, comes around the corner, scolding them for firing a gun as a herd of walkers was lurking just outside the walls, only to stop when he sees the man Clem shot with a bullet in his forehead. He turns to Javi and asks him what happened. And this is another part where we have to put ourselves in Javier's shoes, and remember that he barely knows this girl. He's also shown himself to be pretty honest and well-intentioned, and telling the truth about the situation would be the most likely thing he would do. Clementine's not happy with Javier for doing this, but it's not like she intentionally was trying to kill the man. She made a mistake while trying to show him the problem with the bullets that he'd sold her. She needs to own up to it and understand that being truthful and trustworthy is important. The words Herschel Green shared with Lee all the way back in the beginning of Season 1 echo just as true now as they were back then.
I don't know who you are or what you did. Let's say things don't get better back in the cities, or they get worse before they do. You're going to have to depend on the honesty of strangers if you're going to make it. And if those same people get to questioning yours, you're going to be in trouble.
Tripp takes Clem outside to talk and tells Javier to find the community doctor Eleanor and ask her to fix up the cut on his eyebrow. Officially, she's an EMT, but she knows her stuff and she's willing to help with his injury as well as his need to get back to Kate, Gabe, and Mariana. During the conversation, she mentions something about Clementine that I think is worth noting. She says there's something cold behind the girl's eyes. It's something that we would know based on what we know about everything she's been through. But to see someone else mention it reinforces that this is not the same Clementine we met all those years ago. Tripp and Clementine come up as Javi and Eleanor are talking, and he says she's free to go as long as she doesn't return. He's even going to take them to the junkyard himself to make sure they make it, and to make sure Clementine is far enough away without causing trouble. As nice as that offer is, Eleanor tells Javi that she can do better and escort him and Clem to the junkyard herself. While Tripp wasn't planning on taking them until he's sure the herd is gone, Eleanor is willing to leave before dawn and mentions that she can help in case Kate or the kids need any medical attention. Leaving with Eleanor means getting back to his family sooner, and that makes the most sense from Javier's perspective. Once that decision is made, Clementine rebukes Javier for not backing her up. She's upset at him, but she was in the wrong and he doesn't owe her an apology for doing the right thing. Eleanor has a few patients to check on before they all leave though, and as she goes to do that, Clementine decides to take a nap and treat us all to a flashback. She's dreaming about her time in Wellington. It's obviously been a few months, as AJ is sitting up on his own and coloring. He looks to be at least a year old, and Clementine even notes that Edith thinks that he should have been speaking by that point. He's drawing a picture that's supposed to be Clementine, and as she's trying to get him to say her name, the sound of chaos erupting outside interrupts them. Edith comes to the door and tells her to pack and be ready to run, as a group they'd had prior trouble with returned with a large number of armed people and started attacking. Clementine has a few short moments to pack as she hears the attackers talking about how desperate they were and blaming the people of Wellington for their ailments. Edith returns just as Clementine is finishing up packing and grabs AJ before leading the way out of the settlement. They're almost home free when one of the bandits notices them and fires several shots. Edith is hit, falling to the ground with AJ in her arms, and Clem has to go back for the baby before getting away just in the nick of time. And we can pause for just a second to notice the theme that seems to still be present in the world of The Walking Dead when it comes to rebuilding. Wellington, as far as we know, was actually running pretty smoothly. They had enough supplies to offer Kenny and Clementine a duffel bag of them when they showed up, and Clem and AJ seemed to be getting along well for quite a while before the group of bandits came knocking. But unlike the downfall of Hal's Hardware, the Motor Inn, or the gas station, Wellington didn't collapse from the inside. It was brought down by outside forces. To take a step outside of philosophy for a second, the writers seem to be really pushing against the idea that any society can last. We have the society that we know in the modern world, torn down by a plague consisting of the dead rising. Then, any other societies that form in the wake of that fall like dominoes for various reasons, and regardless of how strong they seem. I honestly think it's overdone for the sake of drama, but we'll cross that bridge in one of the unscripted videos at some point. Back into the episode, we find Eleanor, Javi, and Clementine making their way to the junkyard on horseback. The place looks like it went through hell, and at first it seems like no one could have made it through. Thankfully, Mariana comes out of hiding as Javier finds her tape player and yells for her. They find the van destroyed, and the sound of an engine trying to turn over grabs their attention. Making their way to the source, they find Kate and Gabe in the cab of a truck that's surrounded by zombies. It only takes a couple of minutes to take out the threat, and Kate is very happy to be rescued. At first, it seems like everything worked out, but as they approach the gate of the junkyard, tragedy strikes in the form of a bullet hitting Mariana in the head. As everyone scrambles for cover, Kate tries to get to Mariana, but she's hit by a bullet in the stomach, and all Javier can do is watch as his family seems to be dying in front of him. As Gabe runs to help Kate, Javier has to choose whether to try his luck with the barrage of bullets or provide cover. Providing cover allows them to get to a safer spot, and a pause in the gunfire gives them an opportunity to escape. Clementine wants to stay and finish the fight, but Eleanor is pushing to leave before it's too late as Kate is losing a lot of blood. Javier can choose to either leave with his family or stay behind. As tempting as it might be to try and enact revenge on the group that's been shooting at them, the right move here is to get out of there. Javier has already been away from Gabe and Kate too long, and he needs to be there for them as they get back to Prescott. Clem stays behind to cover them, and as they are riding away, Kate passes out and the episode comes to an end. As the credits roll, we're treated to something that I haven't really talked about in this series. The graphs showing how many people made the same choices as me and how many went the other way. I don't put a lot of stock in these normally, because this series is about looking at what the morally right and wrong choices would be, not what the most popular choices are. But I was torn when I saw the numbers come up for how many people chose to side with Clementine and get locked up versus how many told the truth and went free. It wasn't really shocking, because I knew that a lot of people who played Season 3 sided with Clementine based on their own experiences with her. But it also means that there's probably going to be at least a couple of comments from people who can't believe I would dare go against Clementine. While I can understand the feeling, as I absolutely was on her side the first time I played, it's important to remember, as I've said a couple of times already, Javier does not know anything about Clem prior to meeting her, as she's pointing a gun at him. He is not going to side with her just because she was that little girl that Lee looked after, or because she went through so much hell in Season 2. His family would be the most important thing to him, and he is going to pick them over anyone else. That being said, I do want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. I know Season 3 was a little underwhelming for a lot of people, but it's got a lot more to offer than most people realize, and the story plays a big part in who Clementine ultimately becomes. I released these episodes early for channel members and patrons, so if you're interested in seeing them early and getting some other behind the scenes and extra content, either head over to Patreon through the link in the description or sign up for a channel membership. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up button if you haven't already, and maybe subscribe if you like the channel. I want to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.